Yeah. One of the, passions that I have in a way is because my program had a family psych basis is also, it's not a formal diagnosis yet, but it's called like complex PTSD or CPTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And the theory with that is it's not necessarily that there's this one or two big traumatic events. Yeah, the veteran who got his leg blown off or something. It's repeated and chronic traumas that are kind of these micro traumas that add up. So, and they usually talk about what happens with kids when you're in this environment that you can't really escape from.
So for example, like a kid who's living with an alcoholic parent.
Exactly. Yeah. I was thinking of being raised by an alcoholic parent, being raised by a parent with like a personality disorder, like narcissism or antisocial or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or kids who, bounced around the foster care system and have this disruptions and attachment figures and they didn't have this healthy upbringing. Or even some adults can get it too if they're in a marriage or a relationship too long with somebody who's unhealthy, repeated chronic domestic violence, or that's not even physical. They say, well, he doesn't hit me or she doesn't hit me, but I'm constantly being gaslit. I'm questioning myself, or they're, I'm constantly wondering, worried about what's going to happen next or, things like that. So yeah, trauma can happen in many areas and then it can impact the person in a lot of ways they don't realize.
Right. Because I think when most people think about trauma, they think of like one significant big event, right? But it can actually be many little ones over time.
Yeah. And then it can impact stuff like they'll have stomach issues and they're like, well, I've seen the GI doctor. They can't figure it out. Like, why is my stomach torn up all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. Well-known text on trauma and the effects. And in it, they talk a lot about how like trauma can even be, all the way down into the cells of your body and get into your DNA and stuff. Like it can just really do some havoc.
Right. And then, what can happen is before mental health treatment, a lot of people I've noticed will self-medicate.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, could you speak on that, the self-medication and what all things, people can self-medicate with?
Yeah. In my experience, first thing a lot of people turn to is like drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
They start drinking because drinking and drugs, whether it's illegal drugs off the street or it's misuse in prescription medication, the idea is to avoid my feelings, avoid my thoughts. So if I get drunk, if I get high, I don't have to think about the things.
It's an escape.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's other forms of escapism too, whether that's, okay, I'm going to get into like gambling, start, getting into that full time or not full time, but yeah, like
there are some people who get into it full time. Right?
Yeah, totally. But some of the other ones that we look for in testing that aren't as obvious are things like sex,
mm-hmm.
whether that's, sex with a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, consensual, or even like excessive use of porn,
mm-hmm.
excessive masturbation, stuff where it's like, that's another escapism I can get out of, because some people call that like chasing the dopamine high. It's
right.
like, I want to get that good feeling. So whether it's sex, drugs, rock and roll, or whatever else, other ones we look for in when we do testing is they're a little more subtle, but we call them like tension reducing behaviors, meaning like I've got this negative feeling inside that I don't know how to handle and I'm trying to escape it. And so one way to reduce that tension is getting angry, getting explosive, and so it's like a way to vent it in a way that's not healthy. So, it's always trying to figure out in the testing, like what's driving that anger? Like no one's just angry. They're not just like born angry. Like, I guess we all know some people we call born angry, but there's usually something driving it.
Right.
So
there's some root cause of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I've seen that a lot too. And then with the younger generation more so, but even the older, another one is just tech and screens and social media.
Right.
I want to avoid these bad thoughts, feelings that I have. So let me just scroll through TikTok for 2 hours or let me go through Facebook.
When somebody's looking at their phone, for quite some time during the day, they don't think of that as an addiction.
Yeah.
Right? But it really can become one, or it becomes an escape, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it becomes an escape. And I start to think about it as an addiction. There's a great book I read recently called Glow Kids. It talks a lot about that and talks about how, especially kids, when they're using a device, a screen, it activates the same brain chemistry, brain neural networks as cocaine does,
mm-hmm.
With the dopamine and all of that and, the limbic system. And so it's like, the argument is like, are we basically giving this generation of kids a low dose cocaine? And
right.
You see kids when they're super young and they're on it at school and home and you check their screen time report and it says they were on a device for 12, 14 hours sometimes. It's just,
and that constant stimulation of the brain, right? What does that cause?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be surprised if I take a device away from a kid, a teen, and they go through literal withdrawal symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
They start to get a little agitated and grumpy.
Right.
Their mood will shift almost instantly. And then they're always wondering, where is it? I need to get my fix again. So they need to, okay, you can take my phone away, but just don't take it out of the room. Like, you can put it over there on the table. Like, don't take it away from me.
Right. But because of that kind of what creates a safety net or something, they're actually okay with just knowing it's there.
Yeah. The other thing I worry about is attention span. ADHD is something I'm passionate about. I study a lot. And I feel like if you even look at advertisements, when we grew up, or I don't know how old you are, I'm older than you are probably, but, advertisements used to be a good minute or two on TV. And now these days, if you notice, advertisements on apps and stuff are 5, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Or, there's these new TV shows out that are advertised as 7 to 8 minute episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think a lot of kids love YouTube and all that because you can watch an episode or a video that's anywhere from a few seconds to hours long. And so just that amount of time we're expected to focus, pay attention is getting shorter and shorter.
Shorter and shorter. So it makes it harder for them to sit down and study for a few hours at a time or, do an assignment or a paper, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I think, like you said, it's highly stimulating.
Mm-hmm.
So you're on a device and they are designed to get kids or people, everyone kind of hooked for more. And so they use, the sight, sound, stimuli. And so, so many kids will say, I'd rather sit on my computer for 4 hours than go out to Yosemite National Park because it's boring,
right?
Because the problem too is Nat Geo and all those shows, like they do a great job, but they compress a person goes out in there and shoots, 3 weeks of video for a 20-minute episode.
Mm-hmm.
So then the kids are like, well, this is boring. Like when I watched on TV, there's an elk and then there's an eagle and then I see the moose. And then it's like,
right.
You want me to sit out here for this long and nothing's going to happen? This is boring.
Yeah, that's a good point. And even like, you had mentioned TikTok, TikTok, what is it? I think every video is a minute or less or something like that, right? And then kids are adults, kids, everybody, they're just watching that over and over and over. And so that affects our attention span, right? And
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I think it's because it's training us that it's like you only need to pay attention for a few seconds now.
Right.
And you don't need to because you'll be stimulated by the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and the effects of social media and tech could be a whole nother podcast.
That could be a whole episode on its own.
Yeah. The only other thing I want to say about it is like my worry about tech and social media is I don't know if it was a form, like I heard once back in the day they call it Facebook depression. I don't know if you ever heard that, but I agree with it. Like, the problem with social media is you see these people in their best.
They're just posting the best parts of their life.
Exactly.
Right?
So you look through a feed and you see 20 different people of their best. They're in Fiji, they just had their kid, they're whatever. So you get bombarded with like, wow, look how great everyone else's life is.
Right. Or they just get married or, graduate college, all get a good job, all those kind of things. They're just posting the best of their life. Right.
Exactly.
So how does that affect us?
Because I think you look at that like, wow, look how great their life is, man. My life's I'm not like that. I'm not in Fiji. I'm not getting married. I'm not, and so it's just comparing ourselves to others, but we're comparing ourselves to others in an unrealistic way because you're getting a sample of 20 people in 3 minutes of just their best stuff. So I think that's part of the problem. And then the other problem I have, or the frustration I have, is I worry is like the confirmation bias when it comes in with social media and even our news feed, because then, we get fed more information that confirms a bias we already have. And so someone who's like a theory of depression I heard the other day is like, it's an inability to shift away from negative thoughts and feelings. And so you can go through news and news feed and stuff, and you can just feed that negativity if you want to.
Right, because most of the news is negative.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
there's rarely anything positive showing up.
Yeah, and that can just feed that like crazy. So it's like you look at social media and it's like nothing but positivity that my life's not like that, or it's the news and the world's falling apart and it's all doom and gloom. So
extremes.
Yeah, and so that just affects my mood, the way I feel about myself, life, all that.
And it's ironic that both of those things can put us into a negative mindset, right? And so looking at these positive things over and over, we start comparing ourselves to other people. And then like the news feed, you said the negative stuff, but both of the results of both of those is that we can go and develop a negative mindset.
Yeah, that's the way I see it, at least. Yeah. Yeah. And kind of like that, like I know like Facebook's whole thing, I know they're now called Meta. They just changed their name or whatever, but their whole mission is to connect people. And it's like, yeah, that's great that we're all about connecting people. But then I worry that we're actually not connecting people as in genuine ways. Like, yeah, you may be connecting with people online, but it's not the same.
It's a superficial, right? There's no substance to it.
Yeah. There's
or
no
mostly.
Yeah, I think so. And there's no give and take of a dynamic. There's no sitting with somebody. There's no that social finesse of getting to know someone. And so by saying we're connecting more with others online, we're becoming more and more disconnected with people in real life. And
that's a good point.
With our family and friends. Like, you can look at any restaurant or, I was at a family reunion a couple months ago and I just stuck back for a second. I noticed there's like 20 people there. 19 of them were on their phones, not talking to each other. It's like, I thought we were here to connect.
Right.
But they're too busy checking our phones, checking our statuses.
So connection has actually lost its meaning in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Or it's evolved into something that really isn't connecting.
That's the way I see it. Yeah. Like it's evolved into a way where we're more disconnected though, genuinely. And like you can look at kids' social skills, like the research on kids' social skills doesn't look, it's not good. Basically, we got kids that are more and more awkward, more and more, they don't know how to talk with each other because you go to these schools, you sit in the cafeterias, and you notice that they're just on their phones. Yeah, they're sitting next to each other, but they're on their phones, usually looking at something unrelated.
Right.
So they're not playing with each other, they're not interacting, they're not learning how to navigate relationships and conversations and things like that.
And then that can have a negative impact for their future in adult life, right? Like in their jobs or careers.
Yeah. And I don't know how I didn't bring it up, but when we were talking about escapism, that's the other big one is video games and technology. Because, we see a lot of kids or teens, young adults, anybody who plays excessive video games, and that's their escapism. It's, I can play World of Warcraft or Skyrim or whatever it is. And in there, I can be somebody else. I can be successful. I can have all these friends and relationships, but it's all artificial. And they escape into that life, neglecting the real life here and now. And so then when they disengage, when they unplug, it's different. It's like, well, how do I interact with someone in class? Like, how do I strike up a conversation? I'm used to doing it online over a headset or in a video game, but I don't know how to do it in real life. It's uncomfortable. So since that's uncomfortable, I might as well go play more video games because I feel successful there. And then it's just this cycle that just gets worse and worse.
And it doesn't produce any kind of real value, right?
Yeah, I don't think so.
A lot of the time.
There's some people who argue that, video game improves visual spatial skills and creativity and processing speed. My argument to that is the research I read at least says like, yeah, it increases those skills in the video game, but those don't translate to real life.
Right. Okay.
The analogy I always tell people is like, okay, if this is so true, if your kid's killer at, it's like Call of Duty and he can hit a sniper from 3,000 feet, it's like, all right, let's take him out and put him in real life, Army simulation with put an AK-47 in their hands with some blanks and tell them to go out and hit all those targets. And like the kid's not going to make it 10 steps without falling over or something. And it's like, okay, so it improves those visual spatial skills in the game, but it doesn't translate to real life.
Yeah, that's a good point. But somehow it causes them to feel better about themselves because that's something they're good at. So that's why they, dive into it and stay in it. Yeah.
Because it feels good. It's highly rewarding. It just constant dopamine squirts. Their little brain is just constantly getting squirted with that feel-good chemical when they're playing video games. And so, it's like I said, it's like kind of like taking cocaine. It just, you want more of it because it feels good.
Right. And then doing regular things in life, like studying or, hanging out with friends, it doesn't produce that same kind of dopamine rush. So that's why they don't enjoy it or, they don't see value or worth in it, right?
Yeah. It's not as fun, not as stimulating, doesn't feel as good, don't feel as successful. Yeah. I read one article talking, I don't believe this may be a little extreme, but they were saying that, teens and video games is almost, creating like a dissociative identity or multiple personality thing. Because it's like in their online world, they can be this character, this person, this entity with confidence, with self-esteem. They can design the avatar to look exactly how they want. And this becomes their persona and their identity, and they latch onto it. And so when they have to unplug and go into the rest of life, they have to go back to their other their other form of themselves, who they're not as confident or don't like as much. And it becomes this split architecture in their psyche of like, I've got like these two identities, these two personas or more.